Hello YouTube folks, welcome to my channel. My name is Steph and today I am recommending books based on or somehow involving mythology. Yes, we all read Percy Jackson. There's my collection right there in that very empty mythology shelf of my book collection. We all loved it. We all lived for it. That love continues on in the adult fiction world, and I have a couple of recommendations of mythology books that I really enjoyed, and some of them aren't like Greek and Roman mythology too. Let's get started. The first book I'm recommending is Pompeii mythology, which is really interesting. It does have a lot of overlap with Roman and Greek mythology just because they were so close to each other, and there was a lot of like wars and colonialism and things being passed back and forth. But that book is The Wolf Den by Elodie Harper. This is a really good book. It's really long. I believe it's a trilogy, and I believe that the third book just came out this year. So if you really like the first one, there's more where that came from. But this is a story about a woman who was born into a very comfortable family and then got, kidnapped because of a war that her original country lost. And she ends up in what is called the Wolf Den, which is this place that whores out women. She essentially becomes a prostitute kind of against her will because it's really either that or to live on the streets. And she's a very cunning, very intelligent woman, and she schemes to get out of her really uncomfortable and unfortunate life situation. There's some beautiful friendships between women in this. There's a cute romance, a lot of interesting stuff about Pompeii. Elodie Harper is a historian by education, so she actually quotes things that are written on the front of buildings. I'll give you an example. Please forgive me if I can't pronounce anything. Oh my gosh. It was more like a musical comedy than a respectable dinner party. Petronius on the Satyricon. Trimalchio's feast. I don't know, it probably has something to do with the chapter, but really interesting stuff in here. Very female power, female rage, very in your face kind of when discussing grotesque and complicated topics, but really good one here. The next recommendation is The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek. Hope I said that right. This is Norse mythology, and it's a retelling of Angrboda and Loki and their life together. Angrboda is the mother of beasts and monsters, and Loki was the father of a couple of them, and it's just a really interesting story about inherent power in women and how you are written off as evil and monstrous and terrifying and not to be messed with and must be isolated but can't be killed just because you are powerful and there's nothing anybody else can do about it. It's pretty true to the actual Norse mythology tale of Angrboda. So if you really like Norse mythology, I would give this one a try. Okay, next are Madeline Miller's two of her books, because Miss Madeline Miller loves her Greek mythology. I have Circe and Song of Achilles. I'm going to start with Circe though. This is, once again, a pretty true to the original tale of Circe retelling about the witch who lived on the island. Agamemnon stopped by there. Who else? Odysseus, right? That's the big one. He stopped there, and just kind of her discovering her power and her discovering her role in the Odyssey, in the wars between men and the wars between gods, because she's like part god, part human, right? And really coming into her own when it comes to her destiny and maybe how she could reclaim that a little bit for what she wants and what is right in her own eyes versus what everybody is projecting on her is the right next choice. And then Madeline Miller's other book, Song of Achilles, once again a very true to the tale retelling of Achilles and Patroclus. I'm so sorry. I'm so bad at pronouncing things. You know this, you all know this. But it's Achilles, how he came about his destiny, how he falls in love and how his role in the Trojan War kind of pans out. Gods are real in this retelling, so it's like a little bit fantasy. It's got that element to it. Madeline Miller is also a historian by education first, and she implements a lot of what she knows and has kind of like conglomerated all of the different literature telling Achilles' story. So it's a really interesting take, and it's really beautifully written. The prose is very delicious. It's very lush, very much like the Iliad and the Odyssey, that kind of like very old style discussions and romanticizing of everything kind of going on. Just really good stuff. Madeline Miller, if you like mythology, Greek or Roman or otherwise, you should definitely read some of her work. The next book I'm recommending is probably my second favorite out of this whole list. This is Daughters of Sparta by Claire Haywood. This is a retelling of the story of Helen and her sister Clytemnestra, who are the wives of Menelaus and Agamemnon. Really interesting story of sisterhood. I feel like there's so many retellings of Helen of Troy that really romanticize Helen and put this huge focus on her, but this is mostly from Clytemnestra's point of view and kind of her experience of living in her sister's shadow, but also being the older one, so she has to make more decisions, and Helen looks to her, but Helen also makes all these mistakes, obviously, if you know the story of Helen of Troy, and how that reflects on Clytemnestra, and then the ultimate decision that they make together in the end. Really interesting story of what kind of happens in the background of these tales that we know so well that are mostly centered around men, when women truly are at the center of those stories. Okay, this is definitely my favorite on this list, and this is another trilogy. I don't think the third book is out yet, but I have read the second book. It's sitting there on the shelf. But The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. What an incredible story. Again, this is Greek mythology. This story is from the point of view of Briseis, which is Achilles' captive bedmate during the Trojan War while they're occupying space in Troy during battles and stuff. Briseis is I don't know if she's a princess, but she's some sort of something that's connected to royalty, and she is so angry, but she can't do anything about it because she's just a woman. This is ancient Greek lifestyle. Everything revolves around men, and Achilles is terrifying, but not in the way that Agamemnon and Menelaus are. He's different, and he's not as interested in Briseis sexually, and he's really complicated with his struggles of whether or not to even fight, his lover that's a man, and his mother that supposedly is a goddess of the sea. So she tells this really incredible tale of being a captive, but also kind of being a captive by people who don't have the capacity to maintain her. It's just written so well. It's really short. The second book was longer. Women of Troy, I think it's called. Women of Troy. It's Women of Troy. But Briseis has this language and this view on the world that is just so dark. She's almost the villain of this story, but she doesn't do traditional villainy things. I really recommend this story. Pat Barker did an incredible job telling the story from this point of view that has 3 lines in the Odyssey or whatever, in the Iliad, whichever one has the War of Troy. And her few lines are this huge soliloquy about being sad about Achilles' male lover dying. Just love it. Love it. I really recommend this one. The next book, which is more of a graphic novel I will be recommending, is the Lore of Olympus series by Rachel Smith. Hope I said that right. Really beautiful, cutesy, interesting, webtoon style graphic novel series. I think there's 5 or 6 out at this point. I've read the first 4. It's a modern depiction. There's technology and stuff of Persephone and Hades and kind of what happens. It's very, very removed from the actual Greek mythology. So don't go in having all that knowledge and expecting to see it. It's very different. It's very modern. But all the gods are there. The art is like watercoloring, and like every god has like different colors and features attached to them. It's just really beautiful art. And it's really lighthearted and fun. And that author, Rachel, and illustrator Rachel Smith did a really good job with it. I really recommend the Lore Olympus series. So the next book I want to recommend is not necessarily a book, but an author. Jennifer Saint has written so many retellings of Greek and Roman mythology. The one I've read is Ariadne, but she's also written one for Medea. She's written one for Hera. She's got so many out there. I didn't super love Ariadne because it felt like a really basic retelling. I felt like it was just spitting out kind of what we already knew about Ariadne, that character in the Iliad and the Odyssey. But if you don't have a lot of knowledge of the Iliad or the Odyssey, and you're not really into the Greek mythology thing, and you just kind of want a taste of it, you want like the very basic framework of a character's journey within the context of the Iliad and the Odyssey and the Greek mythology and stuff, really interesting stuff. I'm sure Jennifer Saint's newer books like progressively got better, but I only read Ariadne, which is one of her first. Really cool author, really ambitious to just like be cherry picking these characters and writing full-fledged books about them. So I had to give a shout out to Jennifer Saint. And the last book I will be recommending is not a book, technically, but a play. I am going to recommend Medea by Euripides. I read this when I was in college. Studying theater. Oh, gasps all around. Yes, I did study theater alongside gender sexuality studies. I am embarrassed to admit. But that play is really good. Medea is... she is the ghost floating in the corner of your room above your closet. Let me tell you what. She is scary. That play is so good, and she is so scary. And I had the privilege to see multiple different versions of Medea enacted on stage, and it's just so good to see Medea's heartbreak. Just like nothing is left unsaid. The heartbreak, and then her revenge, and then her demise, and it's so, I have chills right now. It's so good. And if you struggle with reading ancient texts, there are plenty of really digestible translations. You could go see a movie or a play of it. It's so much easier when you have that like visual attachment to those older plays. But Medea by Euripides, the OG Medea story, is just, it's so good, and I can't recommend it enough. If you're a lover of literature, you have to give plays a try. And when it comes to Greek mythology, I can't stress enough that Medea is probably my favorite. All right, y'all, that wraps up my Greek and Roman and Norse and Pompeii mythology book recommendation list. Just kind of a whole bunch of stuff thrown in there. I hope you enjoyed. Feel free to like, comment, subscribe, do whatever you want to do. I'm not your mother, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!